So as a means of review, I'm going to ask you, what have you learned so far? Who are you? A child of God. It's good. It's good. As a child of God, who are you? Salt of the earth. Bless you. And light of the world. A child of God, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. And for my money, this is the central message of this whole section of the Gospel according to Matthew, that we call the Sermon on the Mount. Because in these two little passages where Jesus tells us, explains to us that we are the salt of the earth, that we are what brings out the flavor and the goodness of all of God's creation. Jesus tells us that we are the light of the world, that we illuminate the goodness of all of God's creation. This is the central point. If you don't get this point, none of the rest of it is going to make any sense. So are you the salt of the earth? Are you the salt of the earth? Are you the light of the world? Thank you. Class dismissed. Now, this lesson begins with a whole series of what we know as the Beatitudes. And in this, it is important for us to know and understand that Jesus isn't giving us a list of things that we need to work at, to learn, to do. Jesus is listing out the characteristics of the children of God. Jesus is listing out the characteristics of those who are the salt of the earth, those who are the light of the world, because you are already these things. And what Jesus is going to do in the rest of this section of the gospel is explain to us how we can let go of those things of the world that cloud over, that mask over that we truly are deep inside. Because deep inside, you already are poor in spirit. Deep inside, you already know that everything is dependent on God, that you are dependent on God, the source of all life and love and creation. You already mourn for those around us who suffer, for the world that suffers under the weight of everything that is happening in the world. You already mourn for all of that. You are already meek. You already know how rewarding it is to use whatever power you might have to serve others rather than to gather for yourself. You already know this. It is part of who you are. You already hunger for righteousness. You already desire that everyone in God's creation knows what it is to be fed, to be clothed, to be loved by God. You seek, you hunger, you thirst for that righteousness. You are already merciful. You already know it is much better to forgive than it is to seek vengeance. You already know this. It is already who you are. You are already pure in heart. Your desire for all of these things is what drives you and what motivates you deep within yourself, and you are already a peacemaker. You already seek to reconcile relationships that are broken. You already look to nurture relationships that are healthy because you know that right relationship is the foundation of all of God's kingdom. This is who you are. This is who you are. So for the rest of this sermon, the rest of this collection of teachings of Jesus as captured in this gospel according to Matthew is going to help us begin to understand how we can live into who we were already created to be. And we have to pay attention. We have to learn what it is that we need to let go of. What it is that is clouding over and masking our true selves from shining good and illuminating the goodness of all of God's creation. We have to discern and understand what it is that is diluting our saltiness. But in order to do that, we have to learn. It was funny in first service. Prior to the service, I was out in the foyer area passing out those baggies that you all got. You all got one, right? Because you're great students. Yes? Yes? It was several people this morning were kind of arguing with me. Oh, I don't need that. Yes, you do. Go back and get one. Here, take one. Several people were doing that. It kind of reminded me of being in seminary. And this blew me away because I'm an older student, second career, blah, blah, all that stuff. But I'm at Bright School of Divinity. For those of you who don't know, full tuition for a class at Bright School of Divinity is $950 per semester hour. Do the math. For an average 3-hour class, that's about $3,000. If you pay full price, I'm a disciple of Christ, so I didn't pay quite full price. That's a lot of money. And me being a tall guy, I sit in the back of the class, and most students these days take notes on computers, right? So I'm in the back of the class, and I'm seeing all these computers of my fellow students, that are sitting in front of me. And it always used to blow me away how many of them, as the professor is lecturing in this $3,000 class, are surfing Facebook, shopping on Amazon. This one guy would always look at these satellite image maps of wooded areas. And I don't know what was going on there. But that's all he looked at. Every class I ever had with the guy, that's all he ever looked at. But they had an opportunity. They paid a lot of money for an opportunity to sit and be with someone who is very, very knowledgeable in this field, whatever the field might be. And yet they didn't pay attention. And I always wonder, how much did they actually get from that class? So we have an opportunity to sit at the feet of Jesus himself, to hear these lessons as he teaches us how to be who we were already created to be. So it behooves us to pay attention. So as Jesus is explaining what it is that clouds us over, that prevents us from being that light in the world, that salt of the earth, the first place he goes is probably the most common problem among all of us. Now, this whole section that follows the salt of the earth and the light of the world, this whole section sometimes is looked at as Jesus is superseding the law of Moses. Because in our translations we hear, you have heard it said this, but I say this. And the problem with that is that Greek word that is often translated as but can also be translated as and. And it almost makes more sense to read it that way because Jesus is not saying the law of Moses is no longer valid. It has no more purpose. That is not what he is saying. What he is saying, you have heard it said this, and I say this. So this very first one that speaks to the problem that is most common to all of us. You have heard it. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder. And I say this, whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. And I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. Now first, this judgment that Jesus is talking about is not talking about crime and punishment judgment, where if you get angry with a brother or sister, you're going to pay the piper, you're going to go to prison, you're going to get thrown into the lake of fire or whatever. What Jesus is talking about is God's justice, God's judgment, making right, putting everything in the right order, reconciling relationships. That is a judgment that you will fall under. But what Jesus is addressing here is anger. Does anyone here ever get angry? I didn't think so. Oh, Derek does. Usually at me. But we all get angry. Several months ago, I finally made that phone call. Ever since I started into ministry, I had been advised by a number of very wise people that I need to seek counseling. That anybody in ministry needs to seek counseling. Because we get to carry a lot of people's burdens. We hear a lot of things, a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties, challenges that many different people encounter, and if we're not careful, we'll carry all of that until it crushes us. So I've been told this for years. Yeah, you really need to seek some counseling so you can learn how to deal with that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, whatever. Well, I finally made that call a couple of months ago. And I did it because something was happening to me. I was struggling with, I call it flash anger, for the silliest things. I would just boom, and I'd be mad. And I really had no idea why. Because the things that I would just get angry at, and it wasn't like I was getting violent or screaming at people or throwing things or anything like that, but it was a change within me that I could feel. It was just this anger would come up seemingly out of nowhere. Over the silliest things, I would just get angry. And that's not me. That's not who I want to be. It's not who I typically am. So where is this coming from? Why do I continue to feel this anger bubble up within me? So I made the call. And I met with a counselor. And I've met with him several times already. But we talked about this flash anger thing. And he shared something with me that I find to be very helpful. And so I'd like to share it with you. So if you would, right now, go ahead and get that index card out, your pencil. The first thing he explained to me was that anger quite often is a secondary emotion. It's a manifestation of something else that's going on. And so he gave me this acronym to remember some things to look at when this flash anger crept up within me. I give consideration to these 4 things. And the acronym is GIFT, as in present, gift, G-I-F-T. And each one of these letters stands for something that I need to look at when that flash anger comes upon me. And the first one is guilt. I have done something bad. I've done something wrong. And whatever it is that you are doing is making me think about that, is bringing it up in my mind, and I react to it with this flash anger. So it's guilt. I did something wrong. I made a mistake. I is for inferiority. I'm inferior. I am something wrong. I am a mistake. And whatever it is you're doing or saying is making me recognize that. I am something wrong. I am a mistake. I have to ask you, is there ever a time when that would be true? Is there ever a time where it is true that I am wrong. I am a mistake. Is that ever true? I'll give you the answer. No. The creator of everything that is, the source of all love itself, has told you that you are the salt of the earth. The creator of love itself has told you that you are the light of the world. How can that be wrong? How can that be a mistake? So when this flash anger comes up and you recognize I am feeling inferior, as if I am a mistake, as if I am wrong, it makes no sense. And yet in my mind it goes there. I have those thoughts and I need to recognize those thoughts and attribute the anger to those ridiculous thoughts and the fallacy that they're based on. I am not a mistake. I am not something wrong. I am a child of God. I am the salt of the earth. I am the light of the world, just as you are. The third one, and I've always understood this third one to be the source of all anger, and it is fear. And if we think about it, I am angry because I'm afraid of not getting something that I want or need, or I'm afraid of losing something that I have that I want or need. Fear. I'm afraid for my safety. And something you are doing or saying is threatening that safety. Something you are doing or saying is going to take away something that I need or deny me access to something that I need. I am afraid, and so I respond with anger. So F is for fear. And this last one's kind of difficult. I said tough earlier because that's not the word. The T is trauma. I have been hurt before. And what you are doing or what you are saying reminds me of that hurt, and I'm fearful. So when this flash anger comes up within me and I start thinking about this guilt, this inferiority, fear, and trauma, and I start to identify perhaps one of these might be the source of this anger that is bubbling up within me, it gives me an opportunity to pause and to remember some things. First, I remember that Jesus has already told me I am the salt of the earth, I am the light of the world, that I am poor in spirit, that I am meek, that I am hungry and thirsty for righteousness, that I am all of these things. So how can I feel guilty? How can I feel inferior? Why should I fear? It reminds me of these things. And I forgot to mention earlier that within this text where Jesus is talking about anger is one of the best words in Scripture. The Greek word, Raca. R-A-C-A. Raca. It means you are a fool. You are foolish. That is silly. That is wrong. It was an insult in those days, especially in public, if you were to stand up and go, Raca, and shame and embarrass someone in front of the community. And that's why Jesus says if you say, you fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire, which is a whole nother sermon. But Raca. You see, sometimes when I'm driving down the road and somebody cuts me off, I say other things, but I'm changing my ways. Now I'm going to say Raca. But then I'm going to remember gift, and I'm going to work through what am I feeling guilty about, inferior, fearful, or what trauma is this reviving in my mind. But before all that, I get to say Raca. I don't care. I'm good with it. And that's all good for this flash anger that comes up, the almost silliness of it. But there's another deeper and more insidious kind of anger. It's that kind of anger against someone or some group of people or some situation that just infests my soul. I can't sleep. It begins to color everything that I see. It begins to take me over, and that light of the world that's within me begins to dim more and more until finally it's simply just darkness, and it reflects everything that I encounter in all of my relationships. This anger that I have toward this other person or these people or this circumstance consumes me, and it puts out that light of the world. It robs me of the saltiness that God has placed within me, and I forget who I am. And I have learned that the only thing I can do when that kind of anger is consuming me is to remember that first thing that Jesus said. Blessed are the poor in spirit. I fall to my knees and I ask God to help me to remember who I am. Help me to remember that I cannot do this. I was not designed to do this on my own. I was created as your child. You have promised me you would be with me in this. Remind me of this. Remind me that I am poor in spirit. Remind me that I am a peacemaker. Remind me who I am. Remind me that I am meek, that I don't use my power for my own benefit. I use it to serve others. Remind me who I am. Remind me. Remind me that I am merciful. Remind me that I hunger and thirst for righteousness. Remind me who I am. Oh God, take this anger from me, this shield that covers over who you created me to be. Take it away from me so I can once again bring flavor to your creation, so I can once again shine light on the goodness of all that you are. Remind me who I am, oh God, because I cannot do this alone. Jesus talks about anger first because we all have it. We all experience it. And he doesn't say never get angry. He knows who we are. He knows that we are human. He knows that this whole collection of emotions are in there bubbling around just waiting to come out. He knows that we have difficulty. He knows we will get angry. So he calls us to remember. Remember who I have created you to be. Remember that you are the salt of my earth. Remember that you are the light in my world. Remember who you are. This whole section talks about this remembering. And it talks about the damage that we can do to the relationships that we are a part of when we forget. all of the goodness of God from the very beginning in Genesis revolves around the right relationship. If we remember back to that earliest story of creation, when humans were in right relationship with creation, and humans were in right relationship with God, and God was in right relationship with all of it, that is when God said, "It is very good." So in this lesson from that master of being human, we are reminded of how very good it is when we remember who we are. Amen? Let us pray.